Thank you so much for your introduction. First of all, welcome everybody. I would say if I look at the representation here from everybody around the world, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So let me first try to explain why we think the topic of gender and diversity is really important, particularly important today, because in today's world is marked by unprecedented global challenges. And for that, the imperative for inclusive and equitable research has never been more easy, if more urgent. And I would say it's not merely a moral or ethical consideration, it's a scientific necessity. So from literature, we know that diverse teams enhance creativity, they drive innovation, and they produce research that's of higher quality and better able to address complex issues. Now, as we confront critical issues like climate change, public health crisis, sustainable development, just to name a few, it's essential that our research ecosystem reflects the diversity of the world it seeks to improve. Now, today's discussion and presentation will delve into the progress made and the critical steps ahead to achieve a truly inclusive environment, whereby for now we focus on gender and geography across the globe. Now, we know, of course, that diversity is more than gender. We would have loved to include an ethnicity indicator, for example, but since we're talking about inferred gender and it's really hard to infer ethnicity from names, we decided to leave that for a later opportunity.
First, we're going to look at women's participation in research. This is really important, both because we want research culture to be equitable and inclusive, but also because to accomplish big things and great societal challenges, we need to engage the full range of human talent and expertise and perspective. To measure research participation, we've inferred gender for researchers, as Nicolene said, and we've analyzed active authors who we've defined as researchers who have published twice within a 5-year period at minimum, the minimum of 2 publications. This figure shows men and women's participation over a 20-year period from 2002 to 2022. And the share of women researchers, which is represented by the orange line, has been rising over the last 2 decades. In 2022, it reached 41%. This zone between 40 and 60% you'll see in many of our figures, and it's defined as the parity zone, where the shares are roughly equal. However, this is for all disciplines. When we look only at STEM disciplines, and particularly the physical sciences, the share of women is lower. I want to emphasize something that Nicolene said, which is that simply having equal shares of men and women researchers is not the same thing as true equality, and we're not contending that it is. Were the orange line to reach the 50% mark, it wouldn't mean that women held an equal number of deanships or university presidencies or decision-making roles. But it is likely an important precursor to that and an indicator of increasing equality. So in the previous slide, we saw that research participation is rising. Here we're going to look at that 41% of women and break it down by career stage. That is to say, are these women in the research workforce early career, mid-career, or advanced career researchers? And this relates again to the idea of having women in senior roles. It's important not just that women are part of the research ecosystem, but that they also have positions of power within it and ascend and move through their careers. To measure this, we determined career stage based on the number of years that the researcher has been publishing. So for us, the earliest career researchers have been publishing between 0 and 5 years. The advanced career researchers have more than 21 years of publication history. Here we can see that although the share of women researchers, and we can see that although women make up 45% of that very earliest cohort, at mid-career, the share decreases. And perhaps it's unsurprisingly, there's a drop-off as women leave research, and the share is even lower at the most advanced career stage. We know from the literature, and probably also from our lives, that there are barriers to career development for women, work-life balance, gender bias, funding disparities. All of these things point to the importance of policies that encourage retention of early career women, and that mitigate those barriers. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in this presentation. Here you can see that women are really well represented in health sciences, nursing, psychology, immunology and microbiology, and neuroscience. In fact, they make up the majority of researchers in nursing, psychology, and immunology and microbiology. However, women remain underrepresented across multiple STEM fields, particularly engineering, physics and astronomy, energy, and computer science. Mathematics has the lowest share of women, just 27% of the researchers in that field are women. And the pale line at the very bottom is for STEM as a group, 39%. So there's certainly ground to gain there. Geography is also a critical factor, and it's likely influenced by cultural norms in different countries and national policies that encourage the participation of women in research, or perhaps maybe the lack of those policies. This figure shows the share of women authors by country, and the range here is quite dramatic. Portugal is a leader, as is Argentina. 52% of the active authors in these countries are women. The Hispanic and Latin countries overall have high representation of women. At the other end, the bottom, we see Japan, where less than a quarter of active researchers are women. Women are 30% of the researchers in Egypt and 33% in India. Nevertheless, all the countries, without exception, are making progress towards parity, and you can see a positive compound annual growth rate in that column on the right. Okay, we're going to turn now from participation to looking at grant awards. As Nicolene said in the beginning, access to grants is profoundly important for researchers, and it influences their ability to conduct research and run labs and publish and advance in their careers. So the availability of grant funds has major implications for career trajectory. In other words, for the ability of early career researchers to become mid-career researchers and advanced researchers. Our analysis of grant funding relied on Elsevier's funding database, and we've restricted the analysis to 13 countries for which we had robust enough data. For the countries that met that threshold, we're looking at the share of women with the share of grant awardees who are women over time. The average share of women among awardees went from 29% in 2009 to 37% in 2022. So that's an 8 percentage point increase in a 13-year period. The most impressive increase was in the Netherlands. That's the green line, which you can see. It's climb. That went up 19 percentage points in that period. Denmark went up 13 points. The United Kingdom 12 points. Gains also in France, Canada, and Portugal. While women increased their presence among awardees, they also, during this time period, account for a larger share of active authors in all these countries as well. So they still represent a smaller than expected share of the awardees for most countries. That is to say, it's important to note here that even though there are more women grant awardees, which is great, there are also more researchers overall. And so, except in the Netherlands, the share among grant awardees has not kept pace with the growing population of women researchers. Research output is the number of publications a researcher publishes. And along with grants and citation impact, it's a traditionally important metric for career advancement. This figure shows the average number of published papers by gender across career stages, and it's a good illustration of the output gap. We're looking at lines representing early career, mid-career, and advanced career men and women, and the average number of annual publications they produce. You can see that the group that produces the most is this top blue line, and that line represents advanced career men with more than 21 years of publication history. And below them, that orange line represents women at the equivalent career stage. So these women, advanced career women, publish on average 0.7 publications less per year than a man who's the same career stage. This gap exists at every career stage. Even very early career women, who are the bottommost line, publish fewer papers on average than early career men, though the gap is smaller there. We can see that this trend persists over time and these lines are not converging. So if output is used as a basis for academic promotion, you can see how women, on average, are comparatively disadvantaged. We're going to look now at some alternative lenses for measuring research effectiveness and societal impact. And one of these is multidisciplinarity. Multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, very hot words right now, obviously, and funders see them as key to addressing complex global challenges and important social needs. Multidisciplinary research involves researchers from diverse disciplinary backgrounds collaborating. So if a physicist and a biologist published a paper together, that would be an example of a multidisciplinary collaboration. I'm not going to get into how we quantify this right now, just because it's a bit involved. But if you're interested in our methods, we have a methods appendix, which is accessible from the gender dashboard. There's a methods button. And speaking of which, this slide is a view from our gender dashboard, which Nicolene is going to demonstrate in just a few moments. So in this screenshot from the dashboard, we're looking at men and women researchers for Egypt, that's the bluish green lines, and Italy, the brown lines. And you can see that in each pair of lines, the lighter colored one, which represents research involving women, is slightly higher than the line for men, or in the case of Egypt, almost always slightly higher. So these differences are small, but we're looking at vast amounts of data. And it seems that women's research has become slightly more multidisciplinary, particularly in recent years.